and welcome to Traditional Painting the Digital Way. This is where I use digital painting apps to teach traditional painting techniques. This is the final part of my Vampire Cat series for Inktober week 3. And in this video we're going to go ahead and finish the final color washes and do the final inking. If you're interested in following along with traditional materials, check out part 1 in this series where I have a list of all the tools that you can use for a traditional Inktober. The app that I'm going to be using is Infinite Painter for Android, and I'm going to go ahead and just kind of add a little bit more orange to the cat just to give it a little bit more of some orange on the outside. And I'm using the Marin brush for the watercolor. And if you're following along traditionally, you can use alcohol markers for this step, or you can use watercolor washes with a number 3 round paintbrush, just whatever tool that you prefer to use. And so here I'm just using the airbrush to smooth out the darker color on the edges of the cat and just kind of sort of give it a little bit more dimension and some depth here. And I just wanted to work this up in layers because I don't want a real garish look. I kind of want a traditional watercolor look. And again, if you're using watercolor inks or alcohol markers, you would also work from light to dark and use several different layers. And then I also wanted to color the bats in, and I thought they would be funny if I did sort of a purplish color instead of brown, just because the purplish color will be cuter and more cartoony. And so I'm just using the same brush, the Marin brush, to go ahead and make the purple fur for the bats. And just kind of filling it in around the edges, a little bit darker with a little bit of a darker purple. And then I wanted to go ahead and make the pupils of the cat and also the eyes of the bats red, because that shows then that they're vampires. So I went ahead and did the cat's eyes first. And then here I'm working on the bat wings, and I'm going to make them a black. So I'm using a black watercolor wash. And then I'll also add a little bit of purple maybe to the wings just to give them a little bit of some depth and some color. But that would be the second wash that I added. And so right now I'm just kind of working on the black color of the wings and just filling it in over my pencil sketch. And here I wanted that wing to be a little bit blacker, a little bit darker, just to make the bats stand out a little bit more. And so I'm going over the wings a couple of times just to build up layers. You can use a thicker wash and a thicker paint if you want to, traditionally or digitally. You can use a different brush in Infinite Painter if you want to go ahead and just make them dark at once, but all at once. But I kind of wanted to build these up in layers and just give it that watercolor look. And I also darkened his nose a little bit. I just wanted to make it look a little bit more darker, a little bit more three-dimensional. And then I'm working on the shadow underneath the cat, just to adding some purple there, just to give it some depth and show that he's sitting on the ground and not floating. And then I'm going back over the purple and sort of smoothing it out with an airbrush blender. And I just wanted to go ahead and just give some indications of some shadow under there at this point. And then I'm going back over the bats and just adding a little bit darker purple on the edges of them to kind of highlight that they're fuzzy, that they have a little bit of fur, and just kind of give that a little bit more of a three-dimensional depth there. And again, you can use your alcohol markers for this step, or you can use, there are some water-based markers that will also blend. like the Tombow markers. You can use those for blending, and also some of the Kuretake clean color markers are good for blending. And then here I'm just going back over the bat's eyes. I want them to be red to show that they're vampire bats. So I'm adding a little bit of some red color to the eyes there. And then I want to go ahead and do the background here. Now you can do the background first if you want to. Here I went ahead and put a separate layer on it and added the background last, but it would work the same way if you just did a blue watercolor wash traditionally over your pencil drawing and then just added these other colors. You would still sort of get this look. It would still be kind of a blue tint to everything. So what I've done here is I wanted to go ahead and lighten up the fangs on the cat and also on his eyes. And so I'm using actual white color, and you can use, if you're following on traditionally and you want to do this, you can try your white watercolor and see what happens with it. If you can make it thick enough, it will work. Or you can use white gouache, or you can actually use white acrylic paint for this step. And here I'm using it on the bat's fangs too. I wanted those lightened up. You can also use Jelly Roll ink pens for white highlights over watercolor if you're following along traditionally. And then I wanted to start doing the inking, and I found a brush in the Infinite Painter app. You can go and download some brushes that people in the community have made. So I thought I would try this brush called the Fine Liner brush for the inking. I usually use the Chanel brush, but I decided that I wanted to try this Fine Liner brush pen from the community. So I'm going ahead and just outlining the cat now in a dark black ink. And I decided that I wanted to use dark black ink for this to sort of make it show up better. You can use orange or brown colors, but I actually wanted this to show up better. So I'm just using a bold dark black ink. And I'm working on the medallion and also on his cloak. I kind of wanted to make a paw print on the medallion, but it didn't turn out like a paw print. It looks more like a bat, which is fine because it's a vampire thing, so a bat would be just fine there too. And I'm just kind of working on outlining the cloak a little bit, and I just went ahead and used black ink for the whole cloak and black ink for the cat's head and for his fluffy fur that's sticking out on his cheeks there and around his ears, just everywhere. I'm going to just go ahead and use a black ink for all of this. And so I'm just kind of going over my pencil marks, and that's why I always stress that you need to make the pencil drawing as complete and detailed as possible, because then all you have to do is just go back over it with your ink pen, and you don't have to worry about trying to get the shape right or trying to get the drawing correct. And then here I want to go ahead and add the whiskers. Now I did save the whiskers for last, and I didn't draw those in, and as you can see I had a little bit of some trouble, but on digital you can go ahead and just hit undo. But you kind of have to try to get those right if you're going to do that traditionally. So it might be better if you had drawn those in pencil first and then just go over them very carefully. And here I'm just working on the bats, just trying to give an indication of the fuzziness of the bats and just going over their fur a little bit with the black marker and sort of changing the shape of the wing, not too much, just going over it. But I kind of don't have to have it real smooth because the wings might be sort of ragged or something like that, just to sort of give the indication that they're not your normal bats, that they're vampire bats. They're a little bit different. And so I'm just kind of working on the faces of the bats, trying to get their eyes to show out. And then I wanted to go ahead and add some dark ink under the cat just to give indications of the shadows. And this is a pretty good pen. It's actually, this pen in Infinite Painter, this fine liner pen, actually gives a pretty good ink-like effect. And I really liked it for doing the shadows with it. And then I went ahead and signed it, but as you know, that doesn't mean that I'm finished. I usually find a few more things to do, and so I was just adding a little bit more texture to the cape, just adding a little bit more in there to kind of give it some shadows. And then I needed to go ahead and finish out the whiskers, or you need to make little dots on the cat's cheeks, I guess, where the whiskers are. And so I was adding that, and I think I used the Chanel brush for that because it made pretty nice little dots on the cat's face. So this is the end of my Vampire Cat series, and stay tuned for Inktober of week 4, where I show you what I did for it. So go ahead and hit the subscribe button if you're interested in seeing that. And thanks everybody for watching, and thank you for all your support. And if you have any questions, just leave them in the comments down below, and I will catch you later.